right, everyone, welcome to our holiday gathering for prokanban.org and our live Drunk Agile session today with Dan Vacanti and Pratik Singh. I see a bunch of familiar faces, and I'm so excited to have you all here today, and some new faces. So what we're going to do today is open it up to the community to ask questions of Dan and Pratik. I did maybe offer a bribe if somebody would ask Dan some questions about how story points relate to man hours. That's my Christmas present to Daniel. And we have some fun raffles we're going to give out today too for 2 lucky winners who can win some ProKanban gear from our ProKanban store online. But I just want to welcome everybody. We're really excited to do this. Community is really the heart and soul of what we are trying to build here with ProKanban, and we welcome all of you into this. And regardless of what you do in the Kanban space, there's a space for you here. So welcome to everybody. Does anybody want to kick off with our first question today? Or Dan and Pratik, do you want to kick off with any topics that are?
Well, we just missed one thing, the start of the show back there.
Oh,
this is back there. Yeah, it's just before we get. Let's do things in order. Yeah.
Did she have a hot toddy? She looks like she's.
She always looks like she's had a hot toddy, as you all know.
Yeah, you pretty much have to be drunk all the time to live in that household. We do have a couple topics in our back pocket, but if anybody has a burning question, we can, we'd rather start with questions that all of you.
I might have, if you don't mind, guys. I mean, if you look at the Kanban guide, there are some items that needs to be done to make sure that we have a proper Kanban, right? But what kind of practice and metrics you would recommend that is not there, but you at least recommend us to try?
A practice that is not in the Kanban guide. That
is not. Yeah, this is.
Fair enough. One of the a weird answer to this. One of the things that I have been kind of fixated with of late is sort of team size. Most other frameworks dictate, hey, a team should be about this big. And that's something that we don't really talk about. And I have discovered that people coming into Agile are already handcuffed with, if it's 5 to 8, great. We don't have any other options. So for me, one of the practices I would like people to experiment with is, what about larger teams? What about smaller teams? How does that affect flow? How does that it almost feels like heresy when you say, hey, a team of 35 people. And like, well, try it out and see if it works before we just write it off. So that's where my head went immediately as you asked that question.
Pratik, can you tell us more about why? I know you shared a little bit of this on LinkedIn, but I think you called out some really specific things that you think the forced small teams actually break down. Be a good.
For me, when you start, and this is kind of a flight levels thing as well, I'm not very familiar with flight levels, but I believe this is one of those things where as you, that a lot of your time goes into coordinating and dependency mapping at the org level and figuring out where things are headed. My thing is, if you get rid of those dependencies by creating larger teams, then at the org level, you don't have to worry about this stuff. These 20, 30 people can self-organize and figure out how to get things to flow, as opposed to, hey, I'm a 5-person team, I got this done, now I have to wait for that other 5-person team, which 10 other 5-people team have been requesting things off to figure out how things get done. So that's my rationale. Dan?
Yeah, we have pictures we can show about that too. For me, I was going to go much more tactical. I was going to say things like, in the Kanban guide, we don't mention stand-ups or daily scrums, but I think you should be doing those. We don't mention retrospectives, but I think you should be doing those. We don't talk about practices for good writing and management of work items, story splitting, things like that. But I think, for me, those are kind of table stakes fundamental stuff. I don't really know how you you achieve flow without something along those lines too. I know that's what I was thinking, but most people think, oh, if we're doing Kanban, so that means we throw out all the Scrum events. Well, that's not necessarily true.
Thanks for that, guys.
Dan, how about refinement? Do you feel like there's a place for refinement?
So Colleen has just got a list of, buttons she's just going to push.
This is Colleen's Christmas gift to me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Look, she's even got her drink.
I do.
I'm so glad this is being recorded. I personally hate the concept of refinement, at least the way that it's talked about in the Scrum Guide. I personally hate it. For me, it's all about just-in-time refinement, or it's all about just-in-time discovery, if you will. This notion that we have to do refinement as this kind of separate activity in order to make sure that our PBIs are ready to be pulled into a sprint. For me, not only is that not productive, it's a lot of waste. I would do that. I would do that honestly just in time. It's really just in time analysis, as I think is what Pratik and I talk about. So not a big refinement person. And what's interesting, at least this has been my experience anyway. If you talk to any person in the Scrum community and ask them what refinement is, if you talk to 100 people, you get 100 different answers. For me, refinement's one of those things that really should just be kind of eliminated, from Scrum in general, and replaced with, like I said, the general answer, whenever we get asked a question, the general answer that Pratik and I are going to give is like just in time. We'll just say just in time, just do it just in time. So.
Which probably some Scrum people would agree with you. That's, yeah.
Yeah. I hope so.
It's almost like we're saying that this part of our board is special. In order to move from here to here, we have to have this event. We don't say the same about dev and test. We don't say, hey, we're all going to get together a week from now and look over all the things that we're doing and make sure all the dev is done before it can move over to test. To me, it's the same concept.
And just to be clear on language, before we get hate mail from Scrum people, we're not saying refinement's an event, but clearly refinement is in the Scrum Guide, something that's supposed to happen. How that's supposed to happen, when it's supposed to happen, who knows? But so.
Well, and is it something that can be managed more through pull policies or ready to pull criteria? Is that something you can still have if there's a need for more just-in-time type of activities to refine your work, review your work, discuss your work, whatever you want to call it? Is that something that could be managed more through pull policies on your board?
100%. Shameless plug. If anybody's familiar with the Agile for Humans site, they do a Your Daily Scrum, but we also do a Your Daily Kanban. And one of the very recent episodes that we did was this notion of definition of ready. It's funny how everybody in Scrum loves the definition of done, but the second you say definition of ready, people start throwing rotten vegetables at you, and fruit and everything. And it's like, how can a definition of done be good, but a definition of ready not be good? That seems completely incongruous to me. So anyway, we did a whole episode on that. If anybody wants a deeper dive in terms of what is a definition of ready, should that be used, and how do we manage, to Colleen's point, how do we manage all this stuff using pull policies?
I see a question in the chat from Johanna. She'd love to hear you rant about cost accounting.
Go ahead, Dan.
Take you go. You want to go?
No, go ahead, Dan. This is my Christmas gift.
I think I've said this. I think I've said this many times. And I think I've been recorded when I said this. For me, 80% of corporate dysfunction can be traced directly back to accounting activities. Right? Whenever you see corporate dysfunction, almost always it's because of how accounting works. And accounting, 80% of accounting crap is tied to taxes. So we can take this all the way back and blame the government if we want to. But specifically things like, CapEx versus OpEx. How many times have are you not able to get something done because we need to know, can we capitalize this cost, or do we want to capitalize this cost, or do we want to operationalize this cost, or whatever? We had a lot of it. Pratik and I had a lot of this last week working with a particular client, and how their projects get funded and staffed and everything is down to CapEx versus OpEx decisions, and depending on how it's going to impact the top line or the bottom line, that's how they decide whether a project gets started or not. Has nothing to do with team capacity, has nothing necessarily to do with strategy, has nothing to do with any of that. It's like, how is this going to affect our balance sheet? And that's the trigger for when things get started or not. So yeah, not a fan. I know I see Steve Tendon's on. I know I'm sure he's jumping out of his skin. We talk about throughput accounting and and things like that. So I know maybe we can save that for later. If anybody wants to hear a little bit more about throughput accounting and how it is potentially the antidote to cost accounting. I hope I'm saying all that right, Steve. Then that's where I would go if anybody's looking at, well, how do we replace cost accounting? Throughput accounting is one place you might go. I don't know. Johanna, do you want to pile on? I mean, I'm sure you've got thoughts.
I always have thoughts. I really like the idea of assessing the tax burden and versus the possible revenue income, right? And if that might be a really good entry point to talk to my clients, for example, about if you do it this way, you can make more money, as opposed to trying to limit your tax burden before you even start.
Yeah.
Right. So that's, for me, that's a really nice reframe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pratik, do you have anything you want to add on cost accounting?
Oh, the only thing I would say is a lot of things that we have been talking about have that ex post versus ex ante analysis bit to it. When you're doing cost accounting, most of the time you're doing it way before things have even started. And because of tax code, you're kind of able to do that, but you might be better off figuring out how things went once you've actually delivered something. Alex has his hand up.
Yeah, Alex.
Alex?
I was just gonna ignore that for the rest of the time. Actually, I was just let him sit there with his hand up.
I'll quietly lower it. How about that? Hi everyone. First time caller. It's just really just to build on the last question, and thank you for the answer. Obviously, relatively new community. The website really great. I've kind of been working my way through the resources and found those really helpful. I guess kind of another aspect of the previous question was just around, I don't want to say best practices, obviously, because there are no best practices, but there are also clearly bad practices, which is a community we could talk to. But I think probably there are lots of good practices or complementary practices, maybe. Maybe it's not a question, maybe it's just an ask or an observation. But I think one area as we evolve our Kanban or Kanban into next year is just thinking about actually, where do I go to get some of those good complementary practices from? I think some of them are probably pointed at on your website, but I think, actually, I think there's lots out there, and I think you want to kind of guide or navigate your way through the bad practices and the unhelpful things and really know, actually, this is a great complementary practice. You should think about doing this. And then maybe this is a good case study as well. Is there anywhere that you're aware of that we can go to, or is it just a question of just trying to find the gems out there in the kind of wider ether?
I don't know if you've seen them, but there's a lot of addendums, what we call addendums to the Kanban guide. So if you go to the Kanban guide site, there's a whole bunch of addendums. And so, like if you're wanting to do, Kanban from a Kanban perspective, well, complexity perspective, I would say, there's this. If you want to do Kanban from a whatever perspective, there's the PSK guide on scrum.org and, things like that. But those addendums, and I want to be clear, those addendums are purposely optional. That's why we call them optional, addendums. But I think there's a lot of good information in there. That's probably where I would start. But then, I mean, if depending on your context, like I said, if you're doing Scrum, I'd probably go to like a scrum.org site. If you're doing SAFe, for better or worse, go to their sites. I don't know, Colleen, you tell me. I don't know if our site will ever be heavy with that type of content. I don't know. I would. What do you think?
Yeah, I would also look through the blogs, because I feel like that's kind of the real life stories from a lot of the people, not just trainers, but people in our community. That's a kind of a great place to go look and hear what happens when you put all of it into practice, right? I think the guide is a great starting point, and the pocket guide's a great reference and starting point for best practices. But then there's the reality, right, of team size and, cost accounting, when all the stuff that actually happens when you go to work with teams and organizations to put this into practice. And so I like a lot of the blog content for that.
Thank you. Scrolling through it now as you're speaking. So thank you for that.
If you see the name Pratik Singh, just keep going. Just
Ignore it. Yeah, I'll do
Yeah.
that. Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it.
Frankly, you just search for Julia Wester and read all of her stuff. That's what I would do.
if we're being honest.
Yeah.
Other questions in the chat? Remember, there's $50 on the line.
Oh, wait, there's $50 on the line. I'm sorry, I might have missed it. What do we button here? What's $50? Can you explain it again? Please.
Colleen, do you want to?
Yeah, we have an online Pro Kanban store that's full of Pro Kanban shirts, hats, bags. You can get the Pro Kanban logo or Kanban for Everyone logo. We also have a few that say surrender to the flow. I don't know, is anybody on that has any of that gear? I'm trying to see if I see any faces where I've seen folks sporting it yet. So you just get a gift card to that store where you can go pick out your own gear. We'll be giving away 2 $50 gift cards today.
So one of the gift cards will be for the best question, and one of the gift cards will be just kind of more at random for anybody who showed up, anybody who took the time to show up. So.
Gosh, I think of 1,000 questions when I'm listening to Drunk Agile, and then I'm sitting here now and I'm like, oh, what did I want to ask them?
Stefano, you've got one here in the chat. Is that a question? Just more of a comment? Do you want to share a little bit more?
Yes, of course. Hi, Dan, hi, Pratik, everybody. No, I guess an interesting one for me, probably we also chatted a little bit on this during the SPK course in December in London, is around the progress metrics that are okay to be shared maybe with the management versus some progress metrics that are probably more reserved for teams to use only. This is, I found, always a tricky one, no? Because we need to strike a balance between the need for the management and the leaders to understand that the teams are going okay, are delivering value, but at the same time, not exceeding with the level of information. And certainly, as you already have shared with us, no story points and velocity, absolutely. So I'm referring more to the real metric, not the metric that truly matter. So just was wondering if you had anything in mind around this topic. Yeah, I mean, I've also read the book recently, Accelerate. I think they're also like some of the kind of like they've also informed the Dora metrics. So I don't know if maybe you agree with those four metrics to be the one to be shared. So yeah.
As you said, Stefan, it's a hard one. For me, the questions that leaders are usually looking at are things about, you've started work on this thing. Are we going to get this on time? What do I tell the customers? Those kind of things, or even maybe some quality metrics. Even. Those are the questions that they usually have. Is, are we actually going to be able to satisfy our customers' needs? And to me, I feel comfortable sharing that this like cycle time with throughput age with management, but I can see why people won't. I can totally see why people won't. I like to put it up front to kind of go, this is how the system is running, and these are the things we're doing to make the system better. Yeah. Dan?
Yes. I don't think I have anything really intelligent to add to that. So.
As usual.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Accelerate doesn't include flow efficiency, do they? I'll be honest with you, I haven't read the book, so.
No, they don't.
But
no, they don't.
Yeah, I just love them. Yeah, but like Accelerate and Flow Framework, I love that they all want to come around and they want to rename everything. That's the thing that drives me nuts about, about that stuff. But
Are you referring to also to the lead time part?
yes. So
I see a few new questions popping in the chat before we go to Ez. Steve Tendon has a really important question that we didn't ask you both what you're drinking.
not drinking. It's too early. Steve, you drink one for us.
Yeah, I have a hot toddy which I put some random bourbon that someone gave me, which I don't like it by itself, so it goes into the hot toddy. Yeah.
Pratik, where do you stand on bourbon and coffee? Is that?
Why?
I have my reasons. I have 3 kids. That's why.
Just
Well, then
three reasons.
why are you adding coffee to it?
Oh, fair. I think it makes it an acceptable morning drink if there's coffee in it. Steve's got a beer. What else? Who else has a drink? I heard Jennifer say some Baileys.
Mhm.
Jennifer, have you tried Cool Swan?
I have not.
Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah, I ran out of my peppermint rum chata, so it's back to Bailey's.
Anybody else have a beverage? Okay,
It's
then I
not
guess we'll
too
go to
early. It is 4:30 p.m., but I can't. It's not acceptable to be training kids in kickboxing having had a drink beforehand. So it'll be after that.
You're gonna need it
especially for
after that.
kickboxing.
Yeah.
Yes. All right, as you said, were you tempted to include TOC type stuff in a more targeted way under the practice of improving your flow? Want to say more about that?
Yeah, hello everyone. Yeah, I mean, it's the question is fairly self-explanatory. I've got not much more to add, other than perhaps is it included more in the? Do you talk about it more in the scaled Kanban class potentially? No. Okay. This question is really designed to trigger you, Dan, and just to get you to go on a rant. So go for it.
I don't have any problem with TOC specifically, but short answer is no, we were not, because I mean it's been for me it's been handled much better in other places. Hold on. Always have the book at the ready, right? So that's why we talk to people like Steve Tendon, and I'm hoping if I can maybe pre-announce some stuff that we bring a little bit more of the Tame Flow stuff into Pro Kanban. I don't know that like TOC itself will ever be a recommendation in the guide, as part of the guide, but certainly as we were talking about before, those optional practices, for sure, especially as you get into more scaling stuff. So yeah, I don't know, did I hedge enough there? But if for me, if you want to learn about a theory of constraints, go see Tameflow, go see Steve Tendon in Tameflow. Pro Kanban's probably not the place for that.
Cool, thank you.
Did you want us to? Did you want us to include more?
Well, I mean, I was asked the question by a student in a previous class around this, okay, you want us to improve our workflow, but we've seen from theory of constraints that perhaps what we're optimizing isn't the most sort of limiting factor in the system, and so yeah, I kind of cobbled an answer together, but I was just wondering if there was a more specific way in which we could kind of answer that question around when we're teaching teams around improving their workflow if they were to bring up theory of constraints.
Yeah, we should do, Steve, before you answer, you and I should do a kind of a head-to-head. I'll take more of a variation perspective and you take more of a theory of constraints perspective, and I think there'd be a really good discussion about that. But... Well,
I'll just comment briefly on that. There are many approaches out there, as we know, and many are like copycats of others, and often they distort the original practices. Now, I've been following Kanban since the beginning and working with Dan well, I think it was as early as 2015, 16. And I would say that Pro Kanban is the only practice out there that would allow you to apply TOC. Why? Because of the focus on the work item age. That number, that metric is really completely consistent with all the thinking of TOC. I do not see any others that are doing that. Now, all the upcoming flow synonyms variants that we have out there, no one is using work item age, and that is really the basis for understanding how to apply TOC. I've said this to Dan many times. Dan, you are doing TOC, even though you will never admit it, but you are doing TOC. Maybe sometime we'll go into how the relationship is, but it's really simple. It's really simple. I mean, you all know the story of Herbie, I presume, which is the original formulation of Goldratt in his novel, where he first explained TOC. And you know, Herbie is the scout that is behind in the hike, is the slowest. What is that? No, that scout is incurring the greatest work item age. It is that story. You have it there with work item age. So you are doing TOC already if you're using work item age, but you might not realize the connection. And then of course there's so much more. You mentioned throughput accounting before. Now that is applying the same thinking, but in that domain of the money. Anyway, Dan, we must do something together.
Absolutely.
I'll drop a link in here too. If you have not seen the Herbie video from YouTube, there's a clip of it that Steve's talking about. All right, there's a question from Andrea. Are you aware of the tribalism in the Agile community around Scrum versus Kanban, and how do you deal with this? This could also be answered with drinking, I think.
Yeah.
Pratik, how about you?
It's the answer is yes and yes. Yeah, our approach has always been, there is no reason why these two things cannot work together. There is absolutely no reason why these two things cannot work together. Scrum gives teams some sort of structure that helps them get a cadence around things. Kanban allows things to flow. The problem that I usually see is people have a very, if I could say, outdated view of Scrum, that we need to start with zero WIP and end with zero WIP, things like that. And that is, I think, where that tribalism comes in. Of course, Scrum, and I don't remember the economist who said you can't get someone to say something that's that pays their bills. So someone who has been actively only teaching Scrum would obviously say, well, not obviously, most of the time say, don't look at that stuff. This is already working for everyone. Our approach has been a little different to say, you can layer Kanban on anything and work through. And if you go to the on the Pro Kanban website, there is a Scrum and Kanban article, which Jennifer, thank you for going in and actually providing some feedback and some edits. And yeah, the article's there, and it really talks about it from the perspective of the myths people have about Scrum and Kanban. And probably the biggest myth people have is they don't work together. After about 2 or 3 of these, I'll tell you, forget about Scrum and do Kanban. But the idea is, yeah, they can very easily work together.
Jennifer, you've got kind of a related question there around the naming. Do you want to tee that up?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, just to kind of thanks, Colleen, for noticing that. So I've noticed that people try to put names on when they do two together, and that oftentimes that is also said with viewed as a negative of somebody trying to do a hybrid or Scrumban. What do you think of those labels, and how would you, like, what are your thoughts on them? Would you blend them or Kanban with Scrum? I notice we do say layering and kind of go away from that.
I think Dan's waiting for me. The way I would just say is this is an Agile team, and we figure out whatever are the practices that work best for us to deliver value to customers. That's the way I would approach everything, so that we can avoid the tribalism around it. And go, here's a team. My team's primary job is to get things to customers as quickly as possible, so I can find out if I'm delivering value. We do whatever we do to accomplish that. That's what we're doing.
Thank you.
Camille, you've got another question here. Some Kanban teams are very focused on volume and speed. What, in your opinion, helps to ensure value?
Dan?
Well, I was actually thinking about an add-on to the last question. If I may, can we revisit that just very quickly?
No, it's already in the done column. We
Nope.
don't go back.
Nope, we're moving it back.
Didn't meet definition of done.
Yeah, no, we're
Didn't
moving
meet
it
the
back.
exit criteria.
Yeah, because Dan didn't talk. Yeah, the exit criteria is Dan has to talk. Because I was trying to think about what bugs me so much about things like Scrumban and stuff like that. And I've talked about this a lot in the past, but I think the essence of it is when you start blending those just words together like that. Generally, it means, well, I can do whatever I want from Scrum and I can do whatever I want from Kanban and put them together. And you know what, if that works for you, that's great, right? That's, who cares, right? Who cares what you call it if it works for you? I was just trying to get to, tie it back to this, this concept of professionalism though. I mean, I don't think professionalism is you just do whatever you want and, who cares? And so, there's a reason there's a Scrum guide. There's a reason there's a Kanban guide. That's not to say that you have to do everything in the Scrum guide and you have to do everything in the Kanban guide. But, I think if we just start, hybridizing names, if that's a word, I think maybe some of that professionalism is lost. I think that's really kind of sticking in my craw.
I think, thank you. I think I've heard you say, if you choose not to do all of the Kanban, follow the Kanban guide and follow those practices, don't call it Kanban, that you're not what you're doing. So.
Yeah. I mean, at some point we need to have some agreed definition. So when we say a word, this is what it means. At some point we have to have that. And if we just randomly go around making up words, how do we ever communicate? You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
I think in that same vein too, Corey Lattis put out a book, I don't know, probably, what was it, 7 years ago, called Scrumban, that is a very specific version of blending the two practices together. And so I almost think when I hear Scrumban, it's like, are you using that definition of it, or is it whatever you decided to cook together? And so I think that's just another variation in there too of understanding and tools, right? Like, what's your definition of Scrumban? Is it that version or is it your own?
Yeah, I think that's kind of where I've been sitting with it too.
I can hear your pug.
Okay, sorry.
They're all three right next to me.
Oh, no. All right, so yeah, now that I'm listening again, what was the next question?
Okay,
sorry,
next question. So if teams are focused on volume and speed, if that becomes a focus for Kanban teams, how do we help ensure value is still part of the equation?
Pratik, why'd you give this one to me? You can answer that better than I can.
I want you to answer so I can correct you. For us, this is the thing that gets us in trouble with most of the product management community, and I'm saying most because not all. Some are definitely pretty much weak. This is we cannot know value upfront, and the only way you can figure out what value is by delivering something and then looking at it to go, how is this being used? Monitoring it and figuring out, is this thing actually as valuable as we thought it was? Now, if you follow that track, the way you figure out that is by delivering things very quickly and then monitoring them all. That's where the trick for me is. A lot of teams get into this quick, low cycle time, high throughput range, but they do not go to that next level of, am I actually watching to find out, were these things that I delivered valuable? That for me is just extending Kanban downstream. It's just saying, there's a new column on our board now, which is called monitoring. And we're going to have whip limit that column, and we're going to say, is this thing, are these things actually doing the things that we said they're going to do? So,
Yeah,
that'd be my answer to it. Yeah.
this is where I'm in total agreement with Josh Karyevsky. I mean, I'm usually agree with everything he says, but somewhere along the lines, associating speed with Agile became a bad thing, right? You know, and people say, "Oh, Agile's not about going faster. Agile's not about." 100% absolutely Agile's about going faster. If you don't think Agile can help you go faster, why would you do it? Right? That for me, that's like one of the most fundamental things. So, and to Pratik's point, the reason that we want to go faster is because we want to tighten up that feedback loop. The last thing we want to do is build a whole bunch of stuff that nobody wants. But the only way that we can know whether they want it or not is by delivering it to them. So 100% Agile's about going faster. So yeah, it kind of upsets me too when a lot of people in the Agile community freak out when they say, "Oh, Agile's not about going faster. Agile's not speed. It's not about it." It sure is. Because if it's not, I don't know what we're doing here.
Yeah, I was watching Joanna's comment there. Yeah, it's the best part of this is, when you're monitoring this stuff, you get to learn what you can remove from your product.
Yeah.
That probably is the biggest bang for buck of Agile, to say, how quickly do we find out we're working on the wrong thing?
That's the key part of it, though. Once you find out it's not working, yeah, get it out of there. Get it out of the code base, get it out of the whatever. Get it out. Why would we keep the cruft in there?
All right, next question. Is it Gresgors? You're gonna have to teach me how to say your name. Let's see. All right, well, I'll read off the question. If I remember correctly, Daniel mentioned somewhere that he still can't decide which is worse, story points or subtasks. Can you elaborate? This will be a good one.
If I said that, I'm probably a little bit clearer in my thinking now. I mean, I would say almost certainly story points, are worse than subtasks. So subtasks, for me, subtasks are bad if people think that I'm making an assumption. This is where language comes in, right? I'm making an assumption that when we talk about subtasks, we're not talking about the thing of value. And the reason I'm not a fan of looking, breaking down a thing of value into subtasks and visualizing those subtasks is because, for the most part, that's noise. I don't necessarily care about the individual subtasks. I care about that thing of value. But I would be less upset. I would be less upset if a team came to me and said, "Hey, Dan, we want to break this value item down into subtasks. We want to visualize those subtasks." I'd be less upset about that than if they said, "Oh, we're going to spend all our time story pointing the thing of value." So I'm still on the record of saying I think story points are probably the thing that has set the Agile community back the most. Set the Agile community back, what, 15 years, 20 years? It's 20, here it is, almost 2023. We're still talking about story points. Still. I'd love to see the day where I never have to hear the word story point ever again.
So everyone knows what to send Dan in Slack every morning. Get on there, just send him a message, story points.
Yep, because math, Pratik.
Because math.
Math.
Yeah, and the other thing with subtasks is it's again going away from this idea of we work as a team. say, here are the usually the way I see people do it is say, here's a story that's of value. You're gonna do this, you're gonna do this, you're gonna do this, you're gonna do this. And we're gonna go into our four corners, get the stuff done, and then try to put it back together. As opposed to figuring out how we deliver that value by working together. It's not that that will always happen, but it sets up the model for that to be the default.
All right, Theus asked a question. What are your opinions on code reviewing and the impact it has on flow?
Make sure you have your own code review column on the Kanban board if you're on Pratik's team. Make sure you have to have that. Yeah, it just has to be its own thing, right, Pratik?
Yeah, I have never punched a hole through a wall ever. It's my thinking on this has actually evolved. I used to hate those columns. I was like, don't have it. You're setting up unnecessary handoffs and causing things to just back up. I would say if you're going to have that column, if for some reason you want to visualize that, put a 0 WEP limit on it. As soon as something shows up in that column, our job as a team is to go attack that, get that thing out of that column, which is the behavior we want. We want the behavior of how do we come together and take this thing and move it forward. Yeah, plus I do not know what benefit we get from code reviews that you will not get from pairing or mobbing and doing more of the just-in-time collaboration rather than delaying collaboration for 2 or 3 days. We're talking about making these feedback loops smaller. Why not why not do this together rather than wait for a random date?
I hate to say it, but I agree. Yeah.
Alex, I see you've got your hand up.
Thank you. Just, I guess, a follow-up question, maybe just on another dimension. I'll allow my hand, don't worry. There you go. But kind of the teams that you kind of go into, what would you say are just the 1 or 2 really bad practices or anti-patterns that you just think, oh, they absolutely shouldn't do that, and that you see very often that we maybe as a group of practitioners might be guilty of? An example of that might be, I think you probably feel quite strongly against having a blocked column or an expedite swim lane, for example. It's those sorts of things that are probably quite common that you just hate but see often.
My number one thing would be any type of planning and upfront planning and estimation. That would be my number one thing, the thing that I hate the most. So much effort goes into that, and it buys you very, very little. And usually its return is negative rather than positive.
Well, because you said that already, what would be your number 2 thing, if you don't mind me asking? Cheeky question.
Pratik, you talk so I can think.
Okay. For me, what Alex, the interesting thing that you triggered there was, which I have never thought about this before. Why is it a blocked column and an expedite lane? That I don't know why that's not, that just doesn't fit my head somehow. It's weird to say things get blocked when they're not flowing. We're going to put them in a column. When we want things to flow really fast, we're going to put them in a swim lane. You're changing your flow rules. Why is one a column and other a swim lane? I don't know what the answer is, but that you just made me think of that. Why are we approaching change of flow rules in these different ways? Dan, was that enough for you to think?
Oh, it was. Thank you. I'm gonna steal Pratik's thunder. It's kind of a twofer. It's either so my second biggest pet peeve is probably either when somebody on a team says either, oh, just tell me what to do. I don't want to have to think. Just tell me what to do, and or that's not my job. Right? That's a Pratik thing, but I'm going to steal his Pratik thing. You know, those are probably my second. How many times are you in a stand-up or daily scrum and people just say, just tell me what to do. Just tell me what to do.
Yeah, that hits the professional part of Pro Kanban.
Yeah, I was going to say, can you imagine telling Tom Brady, oh, just tell me what to do, or Messi, right? As Messi, oh, just tell me what to do. I don't think that would happen, right?
I'll add mine to your list too. I always get, I think my trigger phrase is when I hear product folks say, I have to keep my developers busy. We're going to pull in new work because I have to keep my developers busy. That sends me up the wall. All right, Paul, I see you've got your hand up. Good to see you. What's
see
your
you.
question?
We're just letting anyone in.
I know, right? You just let the riffraff in. Well, I was actually going to add on, if I may. It's not as much of a question as a add on to what Pratik was saying about code review, because I've been very heavy on the engineering side, like still in the trenches at times. And so that can trigger devs because they want a space to do code reviews. And what I try, like this summer, I had a couple times where I gave a talk where I was trying to help the devs understand, like, we're not saying get rid of code review, but to Pratik's point, mobbing and pairing, like, have you thought about the fact of the planning and all the estimation that happens up front, right? As devs, that triggers them a lot of times. It triggered me when I was a dev. I get triggered when I'm asked to estimate when I don't know anything at all. And you're asked to code review when at the worst time possible. It's already done. How can I help improve what's there? Because it's already done. So I felt like that resonated with devs, especially devs at that. So if you're having trouble convincing your team to like think outside the box on code review, start maybe thinking about that too, because that can help them like understand, I think. Anyways. It's good to see everybody.
Alicia, you're coming for that gift card. I see it.
Well, actually, this is not even my question. I guess it's just a follow-up to the last one when you guys were talking about the pet peeve, right? Of upfront planning and estimation. Well, yes, but the problem is when you work in an enterprise, right? That's what they need to fund it, right? So my follow-up question is, and I hope you guys really do talk about like accounting, right? In a longer conversation where it's dedicated to that. But my follow-up question to that is, so what's the simple answer, if we could give one, to like, how do we take care of the business needs of letting them understand how much money we need, or and making it a valid and legitimate request that we need this batch of money, while still leaving that space for the creativity and the actual, like, all the factors that are going to evolve as we start working on this. What's the simple answer to handle executives and let teams be have some room?
For me, the simple answer is to be intellectually honest and say because we don't know, whatever method gets us to a good enough answer as quickly as possible, that's what we should be doing, right? And so that's why, Pratik, you'll hear Pratik and I talk a lot about like Monte Carlo simulation and things like that. I don't think it needs to be sophisticated. I don't think it needs to be involved. I don't think it needs to be heavy-handed, because we need to start, again, I'm just stealing all Pratik's thunder here. We need to start from the assumption that we're wrong, right? So much of this planning, you're starting from the assumption that you're going to be right. And 99% of the time, you're going to be wrong. So start with that assumption and say, hey, if I know that I'm going to be wrong, if I'm very, very confident I'm going to be wrong, why am I spending days and weeks and months, planning for something that's going to be wrong? What's a technique that can give me a good enough answer so I can start making some progress? So I would say, I know your executives don't want to hear that, but for publicly traded companies, this is why I always love, especially if it's an insurance company or a financial company or whatever, a publicly traded company, especially, go in and ask the CEO, hey, you guarantee for me exactly what your stock price is going to be a year from now. I want it guaranteed 100%. You tell me exactly on December 21st, 2023, down to the penny, what's your stock price going to be? There's no way they'd ever be able to answer that question, nor should they be able to answer that question. It's the same thing, in software, where for whatever reason, we're held to this deterministic standard that just doesn't exist.
And again, Joanna's doing all the good stuff here, which is I'll add that in to say, I think we've gotten used to funding projects as opposed to saying these teams are fixed cost buckets. Let's fund these teams, and we'll figure out how to get you the most value from these teams. And let's say we don't have to do a whole bunch of horse trading when we're talking about these things. It just makes it a lot easier.
And a lot less variable, right?
Yep.
Than trying to fund projects. Stefano, go ahead.
Yes, mine is a little bit like, I don't know if it's an observation or like a confirmation type of questions, but I hear a lot, not the comment, no, there are no best practices. And I do agree with this statement, generally speaking, when I also read it on books on everything else, especially when we talk about models or frameworks. But do we all agree that if in 2022, nearly 2023, teams, especially software delivery teams, but also not software delivery teams, still don't use a common board or a workflow, pull policies, WIP limits, and some basic flow metrics, well, then it's, you know, it's pretty bad. I mean, obviously it's all about generating value. Okay, but can we all, do we agree that if we really want self-empowered teams, you know, cross-functional teams, super collaborative teams, you know, this is like pretty basic stuff to desire for a team in 2022/2023?
I mean, yeah, for me, everything that you say is table stakes. You know, you're right. I mean, as we've talked about already, there's a lot of stuff in Agile that I can't believe we're still giving airtime to in 2023. So, but I mean, yeah, if you don't have some understanding of flow, I fundamentally believe this. I think I've said this a lot, but I fundamentally believe this. I think the companies that get this will survive, and the companies that don't get it won't. How long that will happen and how long that will take to play out, anybody's guess, right? But I fundamentally think the companies that get it will survive. The Amazons and the Apples and the Facebooks of the world, I think, have survived so far just because of money, right? Just because of, you know, sheer size. When it comes right down to it, when interest rates aren't 0% for 10 years, you know, and now we're having to start to pay, you know, 4, 5, 6%, you know, on invested capital, that changes the equation a lot. So, you know, 0% interest rates cover up a lot of sins. You know, I don't think that's what the world's going to be like in the next 10 years. It'll be interesting. I'm very, very interested to see how Agile kind of adapts to that world. By and large, I would argue we've been lucky with the economy for the past 10 years. My thought.
Yeah, it's just as a follow-up, no comment. It's just that sometimes, to me, when we are in large, especially when we're in large organizations, you know, it always feels like that obviously you cannot be too prescriptive. And I don't want to be too prescriptive, you know, when coaching teams. But at the same time, I still think that there must be some foundational elements, you know, for teams to operate. Otherwise, we will never really progress. You know? So I personally will not anymore like accept in quotation marks, teams that use project plans, you know, deadlines and Gantt charts. So otherwise, I think they will be working backwards. So
you're right. There's a reason we don't do bloodletting and leeches in medicine anymore, right? There's a reason for that, right? And I agree. Agile should be the same way. Absolutely.
Well, I've got one more question for you guys, and then we'd love to hear what your favorite question was for the raffle. And Maria, if you can spin your magic wheel and pick our random winner as well. We'll announce that in a moment. Last question is from Gunnar. ProKanban.org has done a series about Kanban in different contexts. Where do you see the limit, if any? Is there any context or situation where you think looking at flow metrics would be wrong if you want to focus on delivering value?
I almost feel like that's a question for you, Colleen.
Yes, great answer. Yes, Colleen, what do you think?
Well, it's been really interesting. So the series that Gunnar's referring to is Kanban for Everyone, which you can find on YouTube if you haven't watched them yet. And Maria has been really instrumental in helping us get that off the ground. So thank you, Maria. We've had some conversations around everything from HR to crypto to what else? We've done security. I think, you know, some of the things where at least the flow metric side of it may be something like that you might want to optimize for something potentially different other than speed, like Dan was talking about. You know, HR might be one where you're not trying to get people through the system as quickly as possible, depending on what the context is there. you know, when we talked to the folks from on the crypto side of things, we talked about volatility in that industry, obviously, and how important it is to be able to pivot quickly and respond to change. We talked to, when we talked about security, it was also kind of, I would say almost some of the things that we would probably all coach to, of not having an expedite lane, right? For that team, things like an outage are always gonna, you know, if there's a security outage in an organization, that's gonna jump to the top of the line quickly. And so we talked about how are there exceptions potentially for things that we might not coach other teams to do. And I think there are exceptions in a lot of these cases. So the context matters. And so we talked through that through a few different ones. Maria, I'm trying to think, are there any others that come to your mind where we had, and Pratik, you were part of that security conversation as well. Was there anything else in that one that you found to be different from how you would typically coach?
No, I think what's interesting about that one particularly for me is it's one of those teams that we were talking about early on that 20 different teams sends requests to. And at the same time, you have to service 20 critical customers. How do you make sure you service them in the most appropriate way? And whenever you have that, I think Kanban's just a great fit.
We also had some folks on from the education sector, and that was an interesting conversation too, because it was really centered around empowering students to kind of choose their own adventure in the classroom, right? Do we want to keep talking about this subject? Do we want to move to the next? How do we use feedback about our learning to help us decide what to do next in the classroom? And that's another one where maybe speed isn't as important. You're really focused more on that feedback loop and using the feedback about, you know, maybe test scores or output from the students to say, what are we going to pull next? So that was a fun conversation too. We also had a student on that one. So that was a different perspective on all of it. Thanks for the question, Gunnar. All right, I know we're at the top of the hour. Dan, Pratik, top question winner.
For us, it was Camille with Camille. I'm hoping I'm saying that right. Camille with his question about some Kanban teams are focused on speed. How do you help ensure value? I think that's pertinent to this conversation for sure, because at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do: deliver as much value as possible. So, thank you for that.
Thanks, Camille.
Thank you very much. And I'm glad that you said this aloud, that we actually want to focus on value.
Honorable mention to Jennifer and Johanna. I think the question Johanna's asking is the number one thing that needs to be solved soon. And Jennifer, I just want to point out that your question was the one that made me, I think, think the most this session. So thank you for that.
All right, Maria, and who's our random winner?
I have Simon. Cusimano. Still here? Are you still here? Yay! Come on.
Are they still here?
I can see you. You were here earlier.
We need somebody else.
Well, then my next random number was Alicia. So thank you, Alicia.
There you go, Alicia. All right. So for Camille and Alicia, we'll get those gift cards to you in your email shortly. So I'll get those emails from Maria since she registered for the event. Thank you all for joining us today. This is awesome. It's great to see so many faces for names that I've only seen in Slack, and see some familiar names and faces that I haven't seen in a while. I hope you all have a wonderful holiday season, whatever that means for you and your family, that you get some rest and some time with loved ones. And we hope to see you all in the new year. Thanks, everybody.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Happy holidays.
Bye. Everybody, happy holidays.